is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. We're talking today about a topic all of us deal with at some point, dealing with grief. How do we do that? And we have with us authors of a book called God Does No Wrong. Certainly, sometimes it's hard to understand how that could be true. There you see the book, God Does No Wrong. Happy to have with us, as I said, the authors, Jan Howse and Anthony Howse. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
All right, I want to talk, you have a personal story that led you to write this book. I want to get into that in a moment. Okay. But broadly, when people hear God does no wrong, they look at this broken world, they think, how can that be true? What do you say to that?
Well, that is true. And it's getting more broken as we go, the way I see it. I guess it's my faith. That's the only thing I ever come back to, is my faith. I've been a Christian since I was 5 years old. I've sang in the junior choir before I was a junior. I did solos in the church all the way up. And that is one thing that has never left me, is my faith. And so if you don't have faith, it's very hard to wrap your head around a light pole, so to speak, to try and figure out why this happened. I had lost my husband. 5 years later, I lost our son, both to death. When I lost my husband, I had my son. So I had to go on. When I lost my son, I thought I had no one to go on.
I think when people hear God does no wrong, it's hard for them to wrap their head around it when they look at this world, but it's almost impossible for them to think that when it comes to losing a loved one, especially a son or
right.
a daughter, a child.
Right.
And so that happened to you.
Yes.
How do you, what happened next?
I didn't get it either. I was like the world. I did not. How can you tell me God does no wrong? My pastor, who buried Lee and was my pastor for like 20 years, just kept telling me in the emergency room, do you remember God does no wrong? Do you know? Yeah, you know, like the guy, just kind of verbiage to me. And it didn't sink in until I was in church and I could not stay. They would start singing music that Lee and I loved, and I just would have to get up and go home. After 4.5 years, I just couldn't do it anymore, and I had never seen Lee's death certificate. My husband at that time, we were only married 3 weeks before Lee was killed, and he got the death certificate, but he would not show it to me. So I ordered another one. So, good or bad, I bawled my eyes out, but I realized Lee would have been a vegetable or just plain laying there. But today's terminology is they are a vegetable, they had no brain functions or anything.
When you're in the hospital and you have a pastor there saying, while your son is dying, essentially, and you have a pastor saying God does no wrong, you said it didn't sink in.
No, it didn't.
Does it make you angry when someone says that?
Well, yes, it did, when he kept saying that after we were going through the funeral and everything, and he kept saying, just remember, God does no wrong. I said, Larry, how can you say that? How? He was a good boy. He was in baseball, football, scouts. I was a den mother for 3 years, for heaven's sakes, because we had lost my husband. So, I was picking up both ends of mother, father, and everything for this boy. And, he was in private school. They were ready to, when he was 14, to do preparatory classes for college, and I'm like, I just refinanced my car to pay for his tuition for school. What am I going to do with this? How am I going to handle this? But Pastor Larry kept saying, God does no wrong, God does no wrong. So I fought with the Lord for 4 years, and I decided to get the death certificate. And it hit me right then and there that God did no wrong for Lee or for me, because Lee had no brain at all. The way he was bent over to pick up the ball at the curb, the way the car hit him dislodged his brain from one side of his head to the other. He was really absolutely dead at that point. We didn't know that. I didn't know that until I got the autopsy reports 4 years later. And I called Pastor Larry. I said, Larry, can you come here? He said, I got the keys in my hand. I'm already there. And he was only like 3 blocks away from me. And he's used to me calling, you know. We're still best friends. He's in the book. He's one of the endorsers. And he come walking right in the door, you know. And he said, are you all right? What's going on? He said, what happened? I said, this happened. And I'm handing him the the autopsy reports. And he's like, I said, Larry, God did no wrong. And he looked at me and he said, oh my goodness. And he read that and he said,
how old was your son when this happened?
He was 10.
He was 10. I mean, it's just so tragic. But it led to this book. You helped write the book, right?
Yes,
talk about what's in here and how it might help others who are going through this, because again, this is an unspeakable sort of loss.
Well, my perspective on faith, I had well, first of all, a little bit of my background is the fact that I have been doing some preaching and been to theological schooling and so forth, just off and on for the last 30 years. And of course, faith is, grief is something that affects everyone in different ways. Now, for instance, each individual deals with grief in a different way. Now, of course, with Jan, she got angry, and I mean, it's like angry with, like, it's really hard to deal with the emotion as far as trying to put it in perspective that you're doing everything right. I mean, you're living right, you're going to church, your son is in school, he's a good guy, he's not, like doing vandalism or drugs or anything of that nature. He's a good Christian guy, testifying in church and so forth. Then bam, here it is. This tragedy happens. So it really made her angry. And, sometimes I think that just like Jan had already made mention, whether it makes you angry or sad or just you gotta realize that there is a bigger picture here. It's bigger than myself that's going through this grief. And what I'm trying to point out is the fact that with Jan, for example, even though she was angry, God was really trying to test her as well, to bring her to a newer high or a deeper or a more understanding plane in her life. And so basically it brought her to understand that, this is the lowest of low. This is the darkest valley. And right now, she says, she made mention of listen to the sermon to change your scars to stars. And so that prompted her to realize, well, her son would not want her to be waiting on him 24/7 because she's so active.
Right. When you see this, God does no wrong, which is your response to this terrible tragedy, losing your son.
Right.
There might be some who would say, I don't think I could ever get there. They're going to be angry.
Yeah.
For all the reasons that you just mentioned.
Absolutely.
Why my son?
I've said
he was a
Right.
he was a good boy. Why is the world, what possible good comes out of this? And so there is anger. I guess it's important to say you didn't get to this point believing God does no wrong.
No, I didn't.
Quickly.
No.
It didn't happen the next
4
day
years.
or the next month.
Right.
There was a period of what, would you say?
Yeah.
That period of anger, because I lost a good boy. And why would God take a good boy? And I could not fathom that. It just never rang a bell that, you know, Lee was damaged so bad or anything like that. All I had was the initial grief. Excuse me. And it came to the point that Pastor Larry kept telling me God does no wrong, and I was locked into that, and I could not get away from that. How could he not do wrong when Lee was a good Christian little boy? It doesn't figure, doesn't compute, you know. And so I had left church early one Sunday, and that's when Robert Schuller was on, and the last of his sermon was "Turn your scars into stars." And I thought to myself, Lee needs a voice. I know he's only 10, but he did a lot in his 10 years. And losing his father was horrible for him just 5 years before. And we had, and I have it written in the book, we had a burial at sea, which is what Walt wanted. And I was shocked when he passed away and the doctors told me he wanted a burial at sea. And that was one of the dramatic parts for Lee,
was
for
to
his dad.
See that?
Yes.
All right, we have to take a break. I want to come back and ask, go down the road of, some people say God, in other words, are you saying that God did this, or is God just there for us when these tragic things happen? So we'll take a break.
Okay.
Come back, talk about that. Be back right after this.